Hello and welcome to Yerushalmi Berachos Daf Ayin Zion. This is actually the last blot in the seventh parak of Shalosh Sha'achlu, and then we're going to go to the eighth parak, which is Machogas of Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Now it's interesting because my ha'aras that I prepared are actually two main ones, and they literally are the exact same ha'ara, even though they're totally different sigas, etc. So this is what's fascinating. The first ha'ara is about the koshel bracha the Gemara is saying. So Rav Yirmiyah in the name of Yochanan says, Rishonim ha'yisholim, the early ones inquired, and it's very interesting because this shaila, which let me read it and then I'll come back to what's so interesting. Small malisha tisayeh liyamin bekoshel bracha. What's the halacha regarding a left hand giving support to the right hand while making a bracha on the wine? So we know that you're supposed to hold it in your stronger hand. I happen to be a lefty, but I'm putting out my right hand, and the question is whether you're allowed to help with the left hand as well. Now it's very interesting because this seems to have been a kind of eternal question, because the Bavli says the same thing, which is again after the Yerushalmi, and assumingly saw this as well, and already it's saying the Rishonim had the Shaila, and it is a Gemara in Berachos stuff Nun Aleph Amid Aleph through Amid Beis, and there the Bavli actually says that since people never answered the question and it doesn't have an answer either, therefore you should be machmir. The Charedim brings this all down as well. There's, if you take a look in the Ramah in Arachayim, Kuf, where is it? Kuf Pei Gimel, Sifkat and Dala. There's a Taz there and Magen Avram. They're very famous and very helpful for the Sugya. Ayin Sham if you want more info, and I'll mention a drop of it. So the Gemara never answers this question. And the Gemara says, but I do see from the fact that you're asking that question that there are three assumptions. And the Gemara talks about all the halachas of koshel bracha, which I'm not going to go into, but the first one is that you have to hold it in your right hand, because again, you see clearly that that's what it's saying. The second one is you have to lift it, so again, people get tired. And the third one is you have to look at it, which again, how that one is seen from here is beyond the scope of this conversation, but that's what it says. So the Bavli says that you're supposed to pick up the koshel bracha with both hands, the right and the left. And what is this all about? We've talked about this before, that right represents chesed of Hashem, because it's stronger. The Bavli explains that therefore it's more dominant, and the world is filled with Hashem's chesed. And left represents din, which is weakness, which is weak, and it's less dominant, but it's the midas of din. It doesn't have the favor of the right, etc. So we've talked about many times that right and left what they represent. And we talked about a long time ago. We talked about when a person washes. In the morning, when he washes his hands at Teilas Yadayim, so it's brought down in the Sfarim that he should pick it up with his right hand, which shows that everything that happens to us comes from the right, and then he should put it into the left hand, and then pour it on the right first. So it means that anything bad that seems to be bad it's all really Shema Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Shema Echad. It's all coming from Hashem. That's the recognition. So that's the pshat here as well, that when a person makes a koshel bracha, he's bringing down the shefa of tov in this world. And we have to recognize that everything is chesed. Then the question is, should he touch it with the left hand? Because perhaps what it's saying is that really everything comes from Hashem, so there's a certain unification that way. But at the end of the day, everything is really coming from chesed, so it's totally chesed. So do we even acknowledge the left when we're making this koshel bracha? And that's what's really, really fascinating. And that could be what's going on here, why we pick it up with both to show that they're both there, but then we only place it into the right. That could be some of the philosophical explanation underpinning here. And again, this ha'ara is totally different, but interesting. So Rav Zerekan Bar Chamay, of Rav Zerekan, which he was the son of the father-in-law of the well-known Rav Zerekan. So he said Chanukah be'eretz, which is where we say Chanukah, and the Kilso say that the Chachamim praised them, which is what we do. They didn't say it in the same area where you say Ritzei. Rather, it's a separate bracha. It's in Hodah, which is related to the next one, which is what I'm going to talk about in a final thought for today. Rabbi Bab, Rav Chia Barba, he says it's interesting how both of them have similar names in the repetition. Hizker Dayan Ha'emes Batova Metiv. So there was a bracha that was brought down that in the mourner's house, Rahman al-Itzlan, that they used to say. If you look in Orachaim, in that same exact area, and also in Yoredea, it's talked about, again, halacha l'maisa, Rahman al-Itzlan shouldn't be relevant, but the Beragola and many other Mefarshim in that Simon in Yoredea and Hilchos Avelis, where is it? 379. They all say that most people don't do it nowadays. But this Dayan Ha'emes was said at the mourner's houses in the olden days. So he said it in the bracha of Atova Meitiv, and they praised him. So obviously that's the place where it should be said, because Atova Meitiv, like we mentioned a few blot ago, refers to Aruge Beitar, so it talks about death. But there's something even deeper, which I believe is the exact same shot, which is that Dayan Ha'emes is recognizing that the Rebbeinu Shalom runs the world. And I said this shot earlier also in the Gemara that said that when a person's wine turns into vinegar, he says Dayan Ha'emes. Then when he drinks it, he says Shakol Niyam B'dvaro, to recognize it all comes from Hashem. So he says it in Hatova Meitiv to recognize that even though something is bad and I don't like it doesn't feel good, but I recognize in my heart of hearts that the Rebbeinu Shalom is in charge and everything comes from him. And that's why it's so important to say it in Hatova Meitiv, to keep that perspective going. So we should all be zocha that we should see, like we always say, everything that Hashem does is sweet, and we should see. That's why we say it's a Shana Tova Umasuka. It should be good. What do you mean? You just said good. What's Masuka? No, we should experience it as sweet as well, and we also should recognize that what Hashem does, everything's for the good. I'll leave off with one story that I always say over, which is this exact same concept, which is that when my daughter used to get sick, and when I used to take her to the pharmacy to get a prescription for her, so we had they would get the medicine, but then the pharmacist, so if it was for kids, they would put in like a bubblegum flavor that they would mix into it. We called her the medicine fairy. She was the magic lady that would make it taste good. So one time, my daughter was taking the medicine and she drank it and she said, "Daddy, the medicine fairy didn't do her magic. It doesn't taste good." So I recognized then that what was going on was that Rebbeinu Shalom gives us medicine in life. And sometimes that medicine is bitter. Sometimes it's very bitter. And sometimes we don't understand why it had to be that bitter. But Lamaisa, the Rebbeinu Shalom loves us like parents, and therefore he's always trying to give us as much bubblegum flavor as possible. And that's what we're asking for in Shana Tova Masuka, to recognize that everything Hashem brings to us is really good. And Mazel Tov on the completing of the 7th parak, and may we go Mechal Achal on the 8th, and Hashem wrapping up very soon the entire Maseches Berachos. Thank you for joining me.